Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. It is admittedly quite a challenge to detach from the perception that we see sunsets because we're on a spinning spherical Earth, making the sun go below the surface. So let's just have a look at how we can perceive a sunset on the flat Earth. Call this a model if you like, but this model has to include perspective. So I've tried to illustrate the perspective that this person would see from a side-on external frame of reference. Again, it's important to remember that the globe model that we're given is always an external frame of reference of someone on a circle or a sphere based on the observations we make in the sky. So instead of converting it into us being on a sphere, then let's factor in perspective with this side-on view. So here's the person watching the sunset on a flat Earth. And of course above you there are clouds, and then above the clouds is the sun, and there's a large gap between these two layers, as it were. Consider that the sun is going to go off into the distance that way. Okay, the sun's just going to remain at a constant height, and so are the clouds, pretty much. Okay, we've got different layers of clouds, but basically, essentially, this is how it is. We've got the clouds above us and the sun above the clouds. So, of course, due to perspective, a couple of things are going to happen. The clouds are going to appear to sink down to our eye level. Now, I haven't raised the surface to the eye level. We'll just keep it like this for now, just to focus on what's going on above the surface. But essentially, the surface will appear to rise to that person's eye level as well. So just remember that here at the horizon is at their eye level, because everything is coming to converge at their eye level, creating the horizon basically. So we have this gap of the clouds going off into the distance so these are parallel, yeah? The clouds are all parallel to the surface into the distance, and so is the sun, going off and it remains at a height, a consistent height above the surface, but in the eyes of the observer, as he or she looks out into the distance, of course they're going to see this declination, this angling down of the clouds and the sun as they look off into the distance, and the surface rising. This is just an undeniable fact of life, any observation that we make. We have a horizon that appears at our eye level. So as the sun and the clouds get more distance, then the gap between the sun and the clouds is going to appear to decrease, and so is the gap between the clouds and the surface. That will continue to appear to decrease due to perspective. So further off into the distance, we've got the gap between the sun and the clouds has even been reduced even more. It's really no different to seeing the sun go behind clouds. We look up at the clouds and we see the sun go behind the clouds, and there's less light. We get shade because the sun is being blocked by those clouds. And that's essentially what's going on as the sun travels off into the distance. The clouds might stay there, but the sun travels away. And of course it's more and more clouds, and general soupy air is getting in the way. But eventually we get to this point where the sun and the clouds, everything in the sky, appears to meet the surface. And this is where everything gets condensed. And so what's going to eventually happen is, because the clouds are physically lower than the sun, they will block the sun as it goes off into the distance. So the sun's going to carry on traveling away, but the limit of our view is going to be where the clouds appear to touch the horizon. We won't be able to see anything beyond that. So the sun is still up here. Physically, it's up there, carrying on its path around above the flat Earth, yeah, But to the observer, any observer, no matter where they are, even if they're very high up in the air, there reaches a point where, okay, you can see the sun longer, but it will still eventually decline to your eye level. And this is it, basically. You get to a point where all this, everything in the sky and on the surface, mountains, hills, what have you, the clouds, all that is condensed into this thin line in the eyes of the observer. So it's like a black hole. Nothing can be brought back. And people talk about bringing the sun back with a zoom lens. I mean, that's ridiculous, because it is gone. It is blocked off behind the clouds, just like the sun goes behind the clouds when we see the clouds just above our heads. Yeah? It's really as simple as this. When we take this external view of the observer's perspective. So again, this is why perspective is the imaginary curve. The Earth is stationary and level. And just as we see parallel lines, just as we see, for example, pen's running out, train tracks appearing to converge in the distance. Yeah, you see we have to go up to draw this, get this impression that the train tracks are going off into the distance. These are parallel lines. They never physically cross, do they? But they appear to converge in the distance. So in the same way, the clouds are following a parallel line to the surface. The sun is following a parallel line to the surface. But in the eyes of the observer, everything eventually appears to converge. And that's why we can be given the impression that we are looking into a bulge or down a curve when we are given a side-on view of someone standing on a spherical Earth. Because we never get this external view of what we see. Yeah? Perspective is the imaginary curve. Hoping this helps. Thank you very much.